Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 572, interview with David Nasaw about his book, The Wounded Generation, Coming Home After World War II. Mr. Nasaw is a biographer, historian, and the Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr. Professor of History at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. He has written numerous books covering William Randolph Hearst, Andrew Carnegie, Joseph P. Kennedy, and the book Last Million, Europe's Displaced Persons from World War to Cold War, which I hope we can talk about in the future. But today, Mr. Nasaw comes on to discuss his latest book, again, The Wounded Generation, Coming Home After World War II. Mr. Nasaw, thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I really enjoyed your book very much. So if I could be rather obvious from the start, anyone who has studied World War II, or any war for that matter, knows the horrors of war, or at least they know the phrase, the horrors of war. But your book goes so far beyond that. You get very specific. You talk about certain groups. Can I ask, how did the idea for this book come about?
That's always the most difficult question for me to answer. I don't entirely know. I think it was gestating somewhere in the back of my head. Mm-hmm. My father was a World War II veteran. He was a lawyer and old. He was just at the upper edge of the draft age.
Right.
He was brought into the Army and no one knew what to do with him because he couldn't type or take dictation.
Right.
So in the beginning, they made him a chauffeur. And he chauffeured around a Colonel Hutter. Mm-hmm. Colonel Hutter at one point said to him, "Look, I'm going overseas. I'm going to North Africa. This is ridiculous. You're too smart. You can't drive cars anymore. We got to find something else for you."
Right.
So he sent my father to officer candidate school. My father came out as a first lieutenant. And the next thing he knew, he was in Eritrea running a hospital. The chief administrator for this hospital, as it was being pulled apart, the war had been won in North Africa by the time my father got there. Mm-hmm. I don't quite know what happened because, like most kids, I didn't ask, or I did ask, and it was clear that my father didn't want to talk about the war.
Right.
And I tried, but got nowhere. What I did know was, and I knew this, was my father came back an alcoholic. He came back addicted to nicotine. Mm. He came back with full disability for some heart ailment that had developed while he was in Eritrea. He died at age 61, and I never knew the story.
Wow.
I never knew the story of what happened over there or why he had such difficulty adjusting. And the silence of this generation is overwhelming.
Right.
I talked to dozens, maybe hundreds of children like me, whose parents, or uncles or grandfathers were in the war. And what I was told time and time again was that there was silence. There was a wall of silence about what went on during the war and immediately afterwards. So I think that's part of what happened to me. The other thing that went on was when I wrote about the displaced persons, it became abundantly clear to me, as it probably should have been as a historian, that wars don't end with ceasefires. Wars don't end with an armistice.
Right.
Wars don't even end with a peace treaty. For the soldiers, the sailors, the Marines, the airboys who fought, whether they're in combat or in the rear, they carry the war home with them.
Right.
And the pain and the suffering that goes on afterwards is barely mentioned. But it's obvious. You know, when you read books about battle, about World War II in particular, you wonder, you know, how do you transition? How do you move from war to peace?
Yeah, and as your book makes clear, a lot of them did not, because by the time I got finished with your book, the theme was silent suffering, or I didn't know. And we'll get to a lot of that later, but clearly they were just expected, if I may, to soldier on and get on with their life. So when I finished reading your book, I was struck by the irony that when America first gets into the war, there's the gearing up for war materially. We've got to train, and we've got to understand how to fight in this modern war. By the time the war is over with, we've got to bring these boys back home, like you just said, transition them back into civilian life, and that was anything but a smooth process. This kind of touches on what you just said. As far as society in general, did we just not want to know? Is it something we just didn't talk about? It was smoothed over to a degree. It's almost like there was an unofficial agreement. The American people didn't really, I don't know, and I'm asking, want to talk about it. The soldiers certainly did not want to talk about it, and yet they're suffering. I'm just trying to understand, when they come home, is there a collective, we don't want to talk about it, or is it just because these soldiers were being quiet, maybe the American people didn't understand what these boys had gone through? Or is that an oversimplification?
No. I don't think it's an oversimplification at all. And I don't know that we've gotten any better.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, you read about the veterans coming home from Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And again, the assumption is that, yeah, there's going to be a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month of transition, and then they'll just jump right in. We don't take it seriously enough, you know, and we don't understand PTSD. For the GIs and the servicemen and women that I talk about, they came home and there was no such thing as PTSD. Right. It took another 40 years before the psychiatric profession and the VA diagnosed PTSD as a specific disorder. So these guys come home and they are irritable. They are triggered by loud noises. They can't sleep. They have nightmares. They have flashbacks. They find that the only way to ease the discomfort, the anxiety, the depression is alcohol.
Right, and that runs through your book. Can I just ask real quick, roughly how many men did America have in uniform during the war?
16 million, more than 16 million.
Right.
16.2 million. And the other thing that we've got to remember is that this war was different.
Right.
This war was different from other wars because of the number of soldiers who were drafted. 16 million is a big number.
Right.
I mean, that's 1/3 of male adults over the age of 15. And that's 3 times what went on during World War I. World War I, you know, 50, 60% of those drafted went overseas, and they were overseas for 6 months to 8 months.
Right.
In World War II, the servicemen served an average of 3 years, and 75% of them went overseas at one time or another. And the average length of time overseas was well over a year and a half or more. So it's a different level of warfare. And as a result, the post-war effects on the veterans are much more intense than they were. We learned, thank God, the military learned something from World War II. In Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, the tour of duty is much less. And if you're in combat for a period of time, and then you're withdrawn. In World War II, man, what these guys went through.
Yeah.
I mean, from North Africa, think of the divisions that began in North Africa. Then they invade Sicily. Then they go on to the mainland of Italy. Then they fight for a year up the boot of Italy. Then into France. The guys at D-Day. D-Day was no cakewalk.
Right.
They go from D-Day into France. Paris is liberated rather rapidly, but there's Germany. There's the Battle of Bulge, and these guys are there day after day after day after day.
Hey everyone, Ray here. Do you honestly think that you are the only one struggling with ED? Please, you're not. In fact, 40% of men experience ED by the age of 40. But now there's an easier way to fix it. All from your home. No awkward conversations, no doctor's office. Let RexMD, an online telehealth service that helps men get real FDA-approved ED medications, help you regain your confidence. Here's how it works. First, ED meds are not one size fits all, but RexMD has you covered with options. You'll tell them what's going on, your health history, and what you're looking for through a short quiz. Then a U.S. licensed provider will review your information and prescribe a medication, if appropriate. Your treatment will be sent to you with free 2-day delivery. That's it. It's that easy. And the RexMD team is there for any questions you have. And again, just know you'll be one of at least 450,000 men going through the same thing. But they're taking the bull by the horns. What are you waiting for? These are the good years. Now, make them better. And you can get up to 95% off ED treatment with RexMD. Visit rexmd.com/WW2. This is going to change everything. Right. You can't just stop and bring them home. They're in Europe, and someone can easily change in 3 years, even if they're not in a war. 3 years is a long time. 3 years of war, they're going to be affected. And you're right. There was so much we didn't know, and we're gonna touch on some of that for a second, but. The next question, and you kind of touched on this a second ago. So some of the veterans, some of the soldiers and Marines that come back first are the ones from Guadalcanal. Then we get some American troops back from North Africa that you were just seeing. And when they're getting back home, we're seeing the results of battle fatigue. We're not sure exactly what to call it. We're not exactly sure how to treat it. But what are some of the family members? What are some of their civilian friends or whatever when they come back? What are they seeing of these very changed young men?
Yeah. They're seeing, for the guys who come back early before May, before the cessation of hostilities, guys who come back early come back with enormous guilt. They're happy to be alive. They're happy to be home again. but all they think about is their comrades alive and dead. And the pain is just extraordinary. And again, if you come home with a visible wound, or with really bad malaria,
Right.
everybody sort of understands.
Yeah.
But if you come back with PTSD and 300,000 servicemen are discharged have medical discharges for what was called psychoneurotic disorders.
Right.
They had PTSD, and you don't see it on their bodies.
Yeah.
So you wonder, are they cowards? Why are they back? The war's still going on.
Right.
And these guys feel this disdain, this suspicion when they try to go back to work, when they greet their family and friends. It's very difficult. And no one knows what to do with them. If you have PTSD, there's no diagnosis, there's no treatment.
Exactly. Well, that reminds me of something. So the war is not even over with yet. These people come home, and like you said, let's say they don't have scars, and yet, why are you here? It would have been so much more helpful for them to go, oh, I have this, and for the average American to go, oh, okay, so I understand why you're here. I don't see you as a coward. That did not happen. So after all of the suffering in battle, now they come home, and there's a suffering of a different kind, public expectation or guilt, everything. I mean, it's got to be very hard for these people. And the war is not even over with. And my next question touches on what you were talking about your father. So the war goes on, and clearly these people are the soldiers, Marines, naval personnel, Air Force are affected by this. But the war's going on. The military, Congress, whatever, starts to call them heroes, as if that's supposed to help with their problems. But D-Day is coming. You mentioned that a minute ago. We need numbers. We need massive amounts of numbers. And some of those deferments, like you were talking about for your father, they get pushed aside because we simply need as many men as we can for the D-Day. And I'm just thinking, can you give us some examples of maybe some of the people who had deferments? Because I was reading about in your book Kurt Vonnegut, and I was reading about Henry Kissinger. So some of them were able to avoid, I guess, maybe direct combat, if I will. But can you maybe tell us about some of the deferments that were negated, and they were suddenly in the infantry, and maybe a little bit about Vonnegut and Kissinger as they were affected by the war?
Well, one of the things that General Marshall understands, and the Defense Department understands, or the War Department, as it was then called, is that wars are not simply fought by tough GIs and Marines on the front lines. They're fought by people who can break codes. They're fought by people who know how to manufacture and design better bombers. They are fought by people who understand technology and medicine, so that the Army sets up a program. If you score really high on the Army IQ tests, you're not sent off to the infantry, you're sent to school to study engineering, to study programs that will make you a better officer.
Right.
So Henry Kissinger and Kurt Vonnegut, these are smart guys.
Right.
They score really high. Instead of going overseas, they go to school. I forget where Kissinger goes, maybe to Lehigh. Vonnegut goes to a couple of places, and they work hard. Suddenly, it becomes clear in 1943 that we don't have enough reinforcements. Why don't we have enough reinforcements? Because we fight this war at home in the war factories, and we can't let that up. We've got to give deferments to the people who are making the bombs and who are equipping our troops. Not only equipping our troops, but equipping the Soviets and equipping the British. Right.
Yeah.
We are the arsenal. Okay. So we can't let those guys go to war. We got to keep them home. And in the beginning, we don't want to send fathers to fight. And we don't want to send guys over 35 to fight. Well, it quickly becomes clear as the war grinds on two fronts. Two fronts.
Yeah.
That we need more replacements. And where are we going to get them? The decisions are made in 1943 to eliminate this program that sent people like Kissinger and Vonnegut to school to train to be officers. They are pulled out, sent for brief infantry training, and the next thing they know, they are in England awaiting cross-channel travel. That's hard to say.
Right.
On D-Day.
Yeah.
Or directly after. Kissinger is an extraordinary operator, right? Kissinger is German, right? He does not become a citizen. In the beginning, the laws are wacky.
That's right. Yeah.
There's one law that says if you're German born, you can't be a soldier. There's another law that says, well, if you're of age, you should be a soldier. The law is Kissinger is, after a month at basic training, he becomes a citizen.
Right.
But his first language is German. So he quickly becomes a member of the intelligence service. And he doesn't see the same kind of action that Vonnegut does. Vonnegut is captured in Dresden and ends up in a prison camp in Dresden. There's another one. We at some point it is understood that there are too many soldiers on bases in the United States in training, and we got to get them over to Europe. So Dave Brubeck, great jazz musician, the Army and the Navy especially, have drafted these great jazz musicians, and every aircraft carrier and every base has its own band. And Brubeck is playing, in California, and suddenly he's yanked out his place, and he is sent to England and is one of those who goes across on D-Day.
Right. That's amazing. And yeah, because needs must, right? You do what you have to do. However, for everything you just said, and I was astounded when I read this in your book, one of the exemptions that was not lifted, as far as I understand, was tobacco farmers, because the military, the Army put in a request in 1944. I'm taking this directly from your book, 68 billion cigarettes, and they found themselves woefully short. In 1945, it would be 114 billion. Now, we know every movie that you see, every World War II movie, you got the steel helmet with the net, but you've also got the cigarette hanging out. I mean, it looks cool, but this was real. These guys were smoking like, and some of them had never smoked before in their life, and now they're smoking and drinking. Those are staggering numbers of tobacco.
Yeah. Bob Dole goes overseas. He's a young man.
Right.
And he says, I had never smoked before. He said, I never wanted to. I was an athlete. I didn't think it was a good idea. Right. He said, but if the government is putting these in my ration packs,
Right.
if the government says it's okay, then it's okay, and everybody else is smoking. Smoking becomes
Right.
a, everybody believes that smoking does two things. It calms you down. And it may. I've never smoked. I don't know.
Right. Right.
It calms you down. So the government makes a deal with at low cost, makes a deal with all the manufacturers at low cost or no cost. And it produces or it distributes in every ration pack.
Yeah.
If you go into combat, you get extra cigarettes. Guys got packs of cigarettes when they went on D-Day.
Wow.
There are stories about, and you quickly get addicted to this. There are stories about, as I go into combat, what am I going to keep dry? My cigarettes or the pictures of my wife and girlfriend, and the decision is always, the cigarettes. You're going to keep them dry.
Well, you got our priorities.
Yeah. And my father comes back. I mean, it's
Right.
one example. My father comes back, and these are not menthol or low nicotine. These are Chesterfields and Old Golds and
Yeah.
Lucky Strike.
Yeah.
My father comes back, and for the rest of his life, until the doctor says, "Look, you gotta stop it,"
Right.
he smokes 3 packs of Luckies a day. He wakes up with a cigarette in his mouth, and he goes to bed with a cigarette.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a part of him.
And the guys smoke because everybody else is smoking.
Right.
It gives them a break. It calms them down. And also because it shows that they're, tough guys. They're masculine men.
Right. Yeah, they're trying to
cigarette like Bogart.
Exactly. They're trying to keep up with the Hollywood definition of a tough guy. Yeah. Well, inside they're suffering tremendously, which we're going to get back to. But anyway, so later in 1944, after D-Day, the war is, we can see the writing on the wall. The war is going to end, sometime soon. So you've got GIs, you've got Marines, you've got sailors coming home, but for the last, 3 years, they've been learning a very specific thing. They're either learning how to kill, they're learning how to operate a piece of machinery that will help them kill faster. But clearly, when the war ends, they're going to need a different set of skills. So what does Congress do to try to get ready for that process that's coming up? Because they're going to have to be retooled in something in the civilian sector, and Congress knows they have to act.
One of the things I recognized when I began my research, the GI Bill is probably one of the greatest acts of Congress, of legislature that this country has ever known. The GI Bill is passed in June of 1944. And we know eventually the war is going to be won. We don't know what the cost is going to be. We don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
And the GI Bill, I had always thought was passed to thank the GIs for what they had done. And that's true.
Right.
I'm not discounting it. But it's also passed because Congress is scared to death. The White House is scared to death, and it should be, because we're coming right out of a depression.
Yes.
1939, 1940, the unemployment rate is still close to 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear is we got out of the depression by taking 16 million men and putting them in uniform.
Right.
And an equivalent number and putting them into war factories.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when the war is over? Well, Congress, the first thing it has to do is it has to take care of these guys. By the end of the war, there were 12 million still in uniform, more than 12 million. They're coming home. They're coming home at a moment in which the war industries are closing down.
Right.
We We can't let these guys. What happened? The congressmen then, I hope now they know as much history. They knew what happened in Germany and Italy with disgruntled soldiers.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
after World War I.
Yes.
It's called Nazism, it's called fascism. So they also knew what happened after World War I in the United States with the bonus money.
That's right. Yeah.
You know?
They wanted their pay.
Yeah, they wanted their pay in 1932. They weren't going to. They were given bonuses that were going to be payable in the 40s.
Yeah.
Well, in the midst of a depression, the guys want their bonuses, so they march on Washington.
Right.
So the GI Bill is put together to take care of these guys, and it's put together to take care of these guys, to give them special unemployment for a year after they get. Why? So they won't have to go on the job market.
Right.
To send them to school, so they won't have to go into the job market.
Right.
To give them job training, job counseling, job placement,
Yeah.
so that they'll get the right jobs when they're ready.
And I remember reading about, I can't remember, it was the term $20. I can't remember. I think it was $20 a month.
Yeah.
Kept coming up. So they're doing all these schools, they're paying them to help them get through. And excuse me, if I could just agree with you for a second, this is me going on my soapbox. Congress made a decision to invest in these people for all the good that would come later. It's sadly, it seems like we've lost that, but that's a whole nother topic or whatever. Because, if you travel to other countries where education is a lot more accessible, it's a lot cheaper, they're investing in the people. But that's what Congress was doing. One, they're saying thank you. Two, we're going to help you be able to transition to civilian life. But I don't know if Congress fully grasps how many people would go on to start a business. They would go into professions, doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists. This country has benefited so greatly from the GI Bill and for what these young men and not so young men were able to do after the war. Things like that should just be repeated. But again, and I just wanted to ask, I don't think, and please correct me, I don't think that the GI Bill was all in one go. Didn't they have to tweak it or add amendments? I'm trying to remember.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In the beginning, the GI Bill is much more conservative. The goal of the GI Bill is to return men to the status and the places that they would have been had they not been pulled off to war. If you're a farmer, the GI Bill is going to give you a little help to go back and be a farmer. You were college grad, or you'd spent 3 years in college. It was going to give you that fourth year.
Right.
The veterans wanted more, and the country wanted more.
Yeah.
And that GI Bill is changed dramatically after the guys come back. And now the GI Bill is open to everybody, and it gives free tuition, and it gives allowances, so living allowances to the guys who are going back to school. And what happens is, in the beginning, when the War Department was asked, well, how much is this going to cost? Who's going to go back to school? They said, well, not many.
Right.
And they were totally, absolutely wrong. Because the veterans, they come back as veterans and they say, hey, I'm not going to go back where I was.
Yeah.
I want more. I want more. And I'm going to, instead of starting work right away, I'm going to go to college.
Yeah.
And it creates a new middle class, and it welcomes into the middle class immigrant kids, the children of immigrants, the Italian immigrants and Jewish immigrants and, Polish immigrants. They go to college and they enter the middle class. The middle class is transformed. Now, I got to add one proviso here. The GI Bill is a great bill, but how do you pass a bill in Congress? You got to have Southerners have to,
Right.
congressmen have to agree. And how do you get them to agree? Well, you say, look, the GI Bill isn't going to change the racial status quo. If you need African Americans to work on the farm, we're not going to change that.
Right.
We're not going to change that. If you don't want the veterans to come home and register to vote, we're not going to change that. So the federal government is the bank, but the paymaster who decides who's going to get this money, local officials.
Yeah.
The GI Bill, while creating this beautiful, new, inclusive middle class, leaves out two groups, women
Yeah.
and blacks. Why? Well, the GI Bill pays your tuition, but you got to get admitted.
Right.
To
Yes.
college or university. In the South,
Yeah.
by law, all of the state schools are segregated, and there are very few black schools. Schools for blacks and schools for veterans.
Right.
And what about women? Well, this is remarkable. And I found this. Women had gone in large numbers to college, and they had been welcomed when the guys went off to war. How are
Yeah.
the colleges going to stay alive? Well, they got to bring in women.
Exactly.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
the war's over. And the colleges up and down and across the country, east, west, north, south, they realize that the more veterans they bring in, the more money they're going to get from the federal government, and they're going to rebuild themselves. Okay. So they build dormitories for guys, and they convert the dormitories that had been for women to dormitories for guys to bring in more tuition. So women have a tough time getting into colleges. And one of the cornerstones of the GI Bill are guaranteed mortgages, right?
Right. Very important.
Yeah, very important. Well, what does a guaranteed mortgage mean? You got to get a mortgage first, and then the government, the VA, is going to back it.
Yeah.
In the South, black soldiers can't get mortgages from their local banks. And women all across the country, whether they're veterans, right?
Yeah.
Can't get mortgages because the banks say, no, you're going to get married and we're not going to give you a mortgage, and it's not trustworthy. When you get married, you're going to forget it, stop paying the interest.
Yeah. First of all, everything bad that we've talked about, what happens to soldiers in war and stuff that we're going to talk about, like you just said, it was so much worse for the African Americans during the war and after the war. And when I got to the end of the chapter because I'm taking notes as I'm reading your book. When I got to the end of the chapter about the women, all I wrote was can't win for losing. Whether in service, out of service, their men are gone. They're having to work, but at the same time, it's a trade-off. They've got more independence, freedom than they've had before, and some of them enjoy that. But when the men start coming back, they're off the line. They're expected to go back into the kitchen, wearing the dress, having babies, and some of them don't want that. So it's like, when we need you, you're very important. And as soon as the men come back, go back in the kitchen where you belong. I mean, it had to be a hell of and then their husbands, boyfriends, brothers, fathers come home and they're suffering from PTSD. Not that they know this. It must have been a hell of a time. And for the women as well as the men, in or out of uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't pay enough attention. Look, there were more divorces in 1946 than there had ever been.
Wow. Yes.
By the end of 1946, 1 million servicemen had been divorced.
That's insane.
And part of it was, they got married before they went overseas and they didn't really know their wives. But the older marriages, the marriages that had been 2 or 3 or 4 years before the war, they broke up as well.
Yeah.
And why? You just explained it perfectly. Why? Because women during the war have to go into and do it with grace and dignity and perseverance
Yes.
and courage.
Yeah.
And they become welders. They go on the assembly lines. They take over jobs that they had once been told are for guys only. They do beautifully. They learn how to fix the car.
Right.
They learn what to do when the roof leaks
Yeah.
or the sink leaks. They take care of the kids, right? They pay all the bills.
Yeah. They're
They
wearing
pay
the
the
pants.
taxes.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then the guys come back and say, well, I'm taking over.
Right.
Yeah, I'm taking over.
Yeah.
And the women, to keep their marriages intact, say, okay,
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Suffer in silence.
But
Yeah.
that okay doesn't go deep enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, their life has been uprooted and now it's going, it's like a knee jerk reaction twice. I don't even know what that is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
It's too,
yeah.
they lose the guys. They rebuild their lives.
Right.
The guys come back.
Yeah.
And they've got to forget everything that is going on.
Yeah. Can I just, the irony, there are many ironies in World War II. On one hand, these fresh-faced young boys Bob Dole, who doesn't smoke, now smoking, maybe some of them were innocent in the ways of the flesh. There's a lot of smoking, there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of sex going on. These are young men, after all. On the other hand, some of them start getting Dear John letters because women, it turns out, are human too. And the separation, 3.5 years, it's hard on them as well.
Yeah. These are young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
These are men and women, with more sexual energy than they're going to have later.
Exactly.
And part of what happens is that as the GIs liberate Italy, France, Germany, Japan, islands of the Pacific, the newspaper men in Life magazine and Look magazine and the Saturday Evening Post, they publish stories about how when the GIs come into Rome, when they come into Paris, they are greeted. When they come into Marseille, they are greeted by French girls and French women who want only to hug and kiss them.
Yeah.
And their wives are reading Life magazine and they're saying, "What is going on?"
Right.
Well, they know what's going on.
Yeah.
They know what's going on, and the Army knows what's going on.
Right.
Army produces as many condoms as it does cigarettes.
Right.
And sends them overseas.
Exactly.
But the same thing is going on at home. It's not, Look magazine doesn't talk about it. Life magazine doesn't talk about it. But lots of guys overseas get letters from their mothers, their brother, from nosy neighbors that said, "Do you know what Ethel's doing?"
Yeah.
Ethel came home at 2:00 in the morning, and she's ignoring the babies. And so how do you restart a marriage after 3 years of separation?
Yeah.
When each side is suspicious of the other. There's a great story I tell that one soldier comes back and he's going to be honest with his wife. And it takes a little bit of time. And he says, I've got to confess, I had a relationship And his wife says, well, I'll deal with it. And then a month later, the wife says, I can't deal with it, and leaves.
Right.
20 years later, the veteran comes across the wife again. They've both been remarried, lead good lives. And the wife says, Jim, I've got to confess that I had an affair too.
Yeah.
One of the big books in the post-war years is The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit.
Yes.
The man in the gray flannel suit had an affair and had a child overseas.
Yeah.
And in Hollywood fashion, the guy says, I think it's Gregory Peck in the movies. He says, I was lonely. I thought I was going to die.
Absolutely.
He comforted me. And the woman, after a little bit of a fight, says, okay, I understand. We'll support your son overseas.
Right. Yeah. We're going to.
Didn't always work out that way.
Yeah. And again, it's so hard. It's so easy to forgive ourselves. It's a lot harder to forgive other people who do the same thing, but we're human after all. And I'm going to skip over the parts about the foreign brides and the foreign the children, because I want the readers to have something that we don't cover. But the part about the African Americans, and if I could be incredibly naive for a second, I had forgotten. The Jim Crow laws were still on the books. So, of course, the African-American soldiers coming back south, not a lot has changed for them. In fact, very little. And, like you said, the Southern representatives, what you will, the governors, the powers that be, are going to try very hard to keep them in their place.
The men come back. They had been ripped off the farms. They had manual work in the South. They were sent away, and boy, did they grow up fast.
Yes.
They learned how to. They were restricted. They were kept out of combat. They learned how to drive trucks. They learned how to do construction. They learned how to build bridges and dams. They learned how to operate heavy machinery. And they came back with all these skills.
Yeah.
But more than that, they had lived in places where they were looked upon as oddities. People had never seen black skins and they wanted to touch them and touch their hair. But they were regarded as Americans first, GIs second, and way down the line as black people. And when they came back from England or France or wherever they were, they had lived, they understood that segregation is not God-given.
Right.
That Jim Crow is not God-given all over the world. That there are places where they could be respected and treated as human beings first.
Yeah.
And the shock.
Thank you. Yeah. To have a taste of, if I may, normalcy, and then to come back home. That just, how does that not break your spirit? I don't know. When I got to that part, it was just so overwhelming. If it's okay with you, Mr. Nasaw, I want to leave the rest of the book for the people. Thank you very much for being on the show today. And I'm certainly going to give you the last word. But obviously, the way that the veterans were treated, black, white, women, is a mixed bag. And most of it, as far as the whites, unintentional. I think they did the best they could. But clearly, one of the lessons should be, if we can have fewer wars, that would be great. But if we do have them, let's take care of the people who take care of us. But the last question I have for you is, out of all of your research, and after you finish writing the book, what is maybe one of the things that stayed with you or made a very large impact with you after this entire process of this book coming out?
One of the things is that the heroism and the perseverance of the veterans after they come home.
Right.
there was no treatment for PTSD, so they had to treat themselves. And they did.
Yeah.
They did. They didn't read about the war. They didn't watch movies about the wars.
Mm-hmm.
They shut themselves up on July 4th because they didn't want to hear firecrackers going off.
Right.
They dived into work. They went back to school. And within 4 or 5 years, they had distracted themselves so that they didn't suffer from PTSD.
Yeah.
The bravery, the courage that these guys, that it took, is remarkable. And I come away with that. I also come away with the sense that we owe these guys
Absolutely.
and women. I mean, we owe them more than we can, and to nickel and dime them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just not right.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is it's sort of a sacred responsibility, a contract.
Mm-hmm.
They fight for us, and we take care of them when they get home and make sure that they can readjust to civilian life. And if they have problems, if they have troubles, anytime after they return, it's our responsibility as a nation to look after them.
Well said. Mr. Nasaw, thank you very much for this book, and thank you for your time today. Once again, the book is The Wounded Generation, Coming Home After World War II. Mr. Nasaw, thank you very much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.